tell, okay, I just turned on the recording. Walter and I tell stories on mule pack trips at night.
I was going to ask you guys if you guys told stories on the hiking trips. That's great.
Yeah. So I invited him to start telling stories in our group because he did a great job. So, so Walter, take it away.
Okay. Well, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. One time there was sort of I heard it was some kind of echoing kind of sound, so I wanted to make sure it was okay before I started talking. I kind of got inspired last month by hearing some people telling a personal narrative. So I thought what I would do this time is tell a personal narrative. And I hope it's amusing. I'm going to title it, I Must Have Had a Screw Loose. It all started when I was in 8th grade. I went to a church social, and there I met my best friend, Anthony. And he showed up on his brand new Schwinn 10-speed, which was a very rare thing. I had never seen one up close before. And it was so shiny and beautiful. I just fell in love with it. And to really appreciate how I felt about it, you have to understand the kind of bicycle I had. It was a secondhand, probably pre-World War II bicycle made out of black iron, and it was very, very sturdy, pretty ugly, gigantically fat tires, very heavy, and it was good for where I lived because I lived in a northern Chino, which was kind of a rural area. And so there were a lot of dirt roads and so forth to ride on. So having the big heavy bike was very practical. But when I saw Anthony's sleek 10-speed, I was just fascinated. And I looked at it up close. I saw it was brand new, and it was brown, metallic brown paint. The minute I saw it, I thought, it looks just like root beer. And everything was so shiny. It had a lot of chrome on it. And he saw that I was drooling over it, and he said, "You want to ride it?" I said, "Sure." But he said, "You have to understand a few things about bicycles first. 10 speeds are different than the coaster brake kind of bicycle that you're used to." So he showed me all about how you change gears with the little levers and the cables and how it moved the chain over and back. And I was just fascinated how you could change gears and go powerful gears for up mountains and high gears for going on a level ground. Also, before I rode it, he said, "I want to tell you about the brakes." So you can't pedal backwards and make the brakes activate like you do with a coaster brake on a regular bike. These brakes are hand brakes, and you have to squeeze the little triggers. And he showed me how it was kind of like a little mechanical hand that gripped the rim of the bicycle. I'd never seen that before, and had little rubber pads on it. And he said, "Before you ride it, you have to know, never use the front brake." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if you do, you'll crash. If you squeeze the front brake hard, you will flip over the handlebars and land in the street and scratch up the bike." So he says, "Just use the back brake." So he let me get on. I rode around. The minute I got on it, I thought, this is fantastic. It seemed to just glide around the parking lot of the church effortlessly. I thought to myself, this is what it feels like to fly like a bird. It was just wonderful. Those hard little rubber tires that were so skinny. And I rode around and around, changing the gears and stopping and starting. And he let me do it for a really long time. And I finally stopped and said, I'm sorry I took so much time on your bicycle." He said, "You know, I saw that you were enjoying it so much, I just didn't have the heart to stop you." And what a guy. So I fell in love and I got bicycle fever. I came home and I wanted a bicycle. I wanted a 10-speed bicycle. I told my parents, but they said, no, it's too expensive. But I persisted and said, I really, really want a 10-speed bicycle. So my mom, who had all these mom connections everywhere, talked to somebody who knew somebody who sold bicycles. He bought bicycles at swap meets and auctions, and he had inexpensive bicycles to choose from. So we went up to his house, my older brother and I. We knocked on the door. Wasn't the greatest neighborhood in town. And this kind of shriveled little guy comes out. He looked like somebody who had had a hard life and had a life of hard drinking also. He opened up the door and said, come on in. So we came into his living room, and it was different than any living room I'd ever seen. There wasn't any furniture in it at all. The entire living room was packed wall to wall with bicycles, all stacked up, like piled in there like sardines in a can. And he said, go ahead and look and see what you like. So I went around and around, and I finally found exactly the bicycle I wanted. Blue 10-speed bicycle. So we lifted it out, struggled to get it out the door, and got it on the street. I wanted to get a test drive, but I noticed that both the tires were flat. Not only were they flat, they were terribly cracked, and there were strips of rubber falling off and actually flapping a bit as it rolled. And I could see yellowed cord underneath the rubber that had fallen off. But he aired them up, and I got on and rode it for a little bit, and I thought, that's great. And we agreed on a price, $15. Took it home, and I spent weeks working on this bicycle to make it look something close to my friend Anthony's. I dismantled it completely. Every single thing that could come off that bike, I took off. The cranks, the gears, everything that could come off. I dismantled it completely, and I polished every bit of chrome, took off the rust. I polished every spoke. The rims were chrome, and I got them all polished up. And I also took the bearings out and actually polished every single one of them. They were covered with this black grease. It was dry. It looked almost like enamel paint. Used solvent, and I polished them until they were as shiny as sterling silver. Put clean grease in there and adjusted them to perfection. And the wheels spun almost frictionlessly. I was so proud of it. And while I had it apart, I actually sanded the entire body of the bike down with sandpaper and primered it and painted it with a nice bright metallic blue color. I was so proud of that bicycle. And I started riding it everywhere. And it was the first time I had ever had freedom to get around by myself. I could go to my friend's house, I could go to school, I could go anywhere I wanted to on that bicycle. And I rode it as fast as I could all the time, as hard as I could. Now, I was already a pretty avid hiker at this time. And I was also on the track team. I had pretty strong legs, but after a couple of months of bike riding really hard, my legs felt like a couple of steel pistons. I just felt like I could go anywhere. So I decided that I would combine my two interests of hiking and bicycling by bicycling my bicycle from my home in northern Chino up to Mount Baldy. I was going to go all the way to Ice House Canyon and then turn around and come back. And that was my big adventure. Then I decided, well, maybe I should put some new, one thing I hadn't put on was new brake pads. The ones that were on there were kind of hard and cracked. I put on some brand new ones because I figured I would need to have some stopping power coming down those very steep mountain roads. So The big day arrived. I took off on a nice early on a Saturday. I pedaled this thing up, and it's hard to appreciate how high this is. It's from my house, it was 4,000 feet vertical. That's like pedaling to the top of from the sidewalk to the top of the Empire State Building for about 4 times. And on my way up, I was pedaling, and then I realized I hadn't thought about something kind of important. There was a tunnel, and the tunnel was very, very dark. There were no lights in those days. Now there are lights, no bike lane. I had no reflectors. So I stopped, turned around and listened carefully. I didn't hear any cars, and so I pedaled furiously to get through the tunnel before I got run over. Then rested a minute, and then went up the hill a little bit farther, and there was another tunnel, a little bit shorter this time, mercifully. Finally made it to the top, where my destination, which was Ice House Canyon. Very tired, turned around and started coasting down. And I was not prepared for how much speed you could pick up on a bicycle like that, going down those steep hills. I don't think it would be exaggerating to say it was 40 miles an hour on some of the steeper places. And I began to get kind of nervous on some of these downhill portions. And so I squeezed the brakes every now and then pretty hard to kind of slow me down, but I would pick up speed again very quickly. I did that several times, and then I squeezed pretty hard on one to go around a corner, and I noticed the brakes didn't work at all. There was nothing. I squeezed hard, but the bicycle, I didn't feel it stopping. I kind of looked down at the rim, and I noticed that my brakes had melted all over the rim. There was black rubber on the entire surface of the rim, and I now had no brakes except for the forbidden front brake. So I was pretty nervous for a minute, and then after a while, I kind of just thought, well, this is the way it is. And I did discover that if I sat upright, I could slow down quite a bit with the air resistance. And if I went into a tuck, I could go really fast. So I could control my speed a little bit, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do when I got down to the bottom of the hill. Anyway, I kept on going all the way down. I didn't have to pedal hardly at all for miles. Finally, I got down into town, and I ran into my first stop sign, and I squeezed the back brake as hard as I could, hoping that it would grab this time, but there was nothing except sort of a metallic scratching sound. So I gently, very gently squeezed the front brake, hoping that it would be something that would stop me because I didn't want to get run over in the intersection. And I instantly found myself flipping head over heels. I remember sticking my hand out and hitting the pavement with it. My bicycle was upside down. It was scratched up. Some things were dented. I was definitely scratched up. I looked at the palm of my hand and I saw all this blood and lacerated skin. I thought, that looks just like a pepperoni pizza. And then I thought, I've got to find why did this happen? Because the bicycle, the front wheel stopped instantly, even though I just barely squeezed it. And I noticed what had happened. The little brake pad, I didn't tighten it. I had a screw loose and the thing slipped down. So when I squeezed it, it went right into the spokes. Instead of gently stopping it, it's instantly stopped the front wheel, and that's what tossed me. And I thought to myself, thanks to my friend Anthony, who warned me about front brakes, that I didn't try to squeeze the front brake a little bit on that hill, I probably would have been seriously injured or killed. So that was a contemplation that gave me a little bit of pause.
That's a great story. I grew up in Claremont, so that whole thing resonates with me. Thank you for sharing that. That's a harrowing story.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah,
And
that
it
was
just
great.
goes to show what little tidbits of information stick in just the right places in your brain.
Yeah, that was great. Okay. Adrian, do you have a story tonight?
Not at the moment. I've been prepping for job interviews.
Oh,
So I've been telling other kinds of stories.
There you go.
I don't at the
Real life
moment.
stories.
What's that?
Real life stories.
Yeah, exactly. Tales from the classroom and in the trenches.
John, I apologize. I'm not prepared, but I'm gonna make my way back to the stage. So
okay.
I will be contributing soon, I promise.
Okay. Well, since Walter told a personal story, I think I may have a couple of short personal stories I'd like to share. And one of them has to do with a bicycle. And when we moved from Pennsylvania to California, we moved in with my grandfather. My mother and I traveled first because my grandmother was sick with cancer. And in fact, about a month after we arrived, I think we arrived in May or June, and about a month later, my grandmother died. And at that point, my grandfather, who was my mother's father, said, why don't you tell the rest of your family to come join you here? You can live in my house. My dad was having trouble finding work. This was in 1953. Actually, he was having trouble keeping his jobs. And so they did come join us about August. They arrived late August, just before school started. Back then, school always started the day after Labor Day. The first Tuesday of September was always the first day of school. And so we lived with my grandfather, who then died a couple months later, which, you know, sometimes happen with married couples who are older. When one dies, the other dies shortly thereafter, and that's what happened. And so he had willed the house to his daughter, my mother, and so we stayed there. And my dad got a good job. He got a job working for Kaiser Permanente. This was 1953, and at that time, Kaiser Permanente was just for employees of Kaiser Steel. It was a benefit to the employees. This health insurance was being provided free. And he got a job as an accountant, and he was doing quite well. He actually was a smart man, even though he had a drinking problem, which sometimes got in the way. But he was staying sober enough to keep the job and doing well. And so I was 6 years old. So let's see, in 53, I was 4. So 2 years later, my parents were feeling pretty financially secure, and they wanted to get me a special Christmas present. Now, it was not something I asked for. And I forget what I asked for, but they didn't get what I asked for. They got what they thought would be something I would like, and it was a bicycle. But I wasn't interested in getting a bicycle. I didn't know how to ride a bicycle. And so the bicycle sat in the garage. I didn't even want to try it. And one day I was messing around in the garage, and I don't know what prompted this, but I found a carpet cutter. I don't know if you know what a carpet cutter is. It's kind of a curved metal thing with a sharp edge. And I decided to try it out on my bicycle seat. and I cut up my bicycle seat. And then realized what I had done and put it away and left and didn't say anything. And a couple of days later, my parents noticed that the bicycle seat had been cut up. So my dad gathered the three of us. I had two older brothers. And first he asked my brother, Jim, who was the oldest. And he said, Jim, do you know anything about John's bicycle seat being cut up? And Jim said, no, I did see it has been cut up, but I have no idea how it happened. And then my dad asked my brother, Bill, who is 5 years older than me, and said, Bill, do you know anything about John's bicycle seat getting cut up? And he said, I didn't even know it was cut up. I hadn't even seen it. That's news to me. I know nothing about it. And then my dad asked me, John, do you know what happened to your bicycle seat? And I blurted out, I wasn't even in the garage. And of course, I was the one who did it, and it eventually came out, and I had to fess up to it. But my saying that became a family legend. Whenever something happened and people wonder, well, who messed that thing up? And everybody would say, I wasn't even in the garage. And it, I don't remember whether I got a spanking for doing that or not. I got some stern words, I'm sure. And I think the shame I felt for denying having done it and constantly being reminded over the years contributed to my never wanting to do anything wrong again. And I never got in trouble in school because I was afraid of what my parents would think, and it would bring shame on the family. I was only sent to the principal's office once. In 6th grade, I was sent. In 6th grade, they divided up the classes for math. So my regular teacher was not my math teacher. I went to another 6th grade classroom because it was the advanced math group, and my teacher taught the less advanced math group. And I didn't like that other teacher. And so I guess I was talking at some point when I should have been listening, and I was sent to the principal's office to write 50 times, I will not talk out of turn in class. And when my teacher found out that that had happened, he started laughing. He said, John, talking in class? That is the funniest thing I've ever heard. He thought that was hilarious. I did not think it was hilarious. I was mortified that I had been caught talking in class and sent to the principal's office, and that never happened again. But anyway, I think the fact that I never got in trouble at school had something to do with the experience of me saying I was never in the garage when and doing something that was wrong, and the shame that I felt from that kind of motivated me to try to toe the line. So that's my little story.
That's awesome.
I've been in the garage a few times, John.
What was your initial motivation for trying out that tool on the bike seat?
I don't remember. See, the only thing I remember is my saying I wasn't even in the garage.
So you weren't like trying to remove it or do
I don't know. You know, I wasn't. I was disappointed I got the bike for Christmas, to tell you the truth. I wanted something else that would have been far cheaper. But my parents finally had some money and they wanted to give me a nice present. Now, eventually, then, after that incident, I felt, with a little pressure from my parents, I felt an obligation to learn how to ride the bike. And eventually I enjoyed riding the bike. It was great. But Yeah, at first I wasn't happy with it.
Well, I just think that's hysterical. It reminds me of in our family, we would always forget. I grew up in the Bay Area. We'd always forget where Novato was. It's this little city across the San Francisco Bay on the east side of the bay. And my mom, my mom would ask my dad, like, where's Novato? And, and finally he was like, for the 10th time. So anytime we were like annoying one another, we would just go, where's Novato?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny how different families have those kinds of sayings. Yeah.
And I had a friend over who and when I said that, she didn't understand why that got the reaction it did. And I said, I'll explain it later. Oh man. Well, actually, I have thought of a story that I'd be, since we're kind of doing tales of childhood. I do have one, unless Barbara, you were going to jump in?
No, go.
Oh, okay. Well, I was kind of a timid child when it came to like physical things. I mean, I would camp, I would hike, I would do all sorts of things, bicycle ride, play tennis, swim, all that stuff. But I wasn't a big risk taker. And I think a lot of that was just because our family was just so, I don't know, dysfunctional. There was already enough risk going on every day. And so when I got into college, I was working at a kids camp at Camp Hammer up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, Big Basin area in the summers, and for 2 summers. And I was Beaker, the crafts director. And because I was on staff, I was kind of support staff for some of the counselors who wanted to, they needed a little extra help, or they just needed a break or something. And this other guy who was on staff, he was on maintenance, Andy, his camp name was Guppy. And we'd always have a camp out under the stars. Tuesday nights, it was all boys, and Wednesday nights, it was all girls. And it was this campsite kind of away from the camp where all the cabins were. And there were these sleeping platforms out under the redwood trees. It was just wonderful. And so every week that was the thing. And Guppy and I would go out, so Guppy and Beaker, we'd go out and we would provide the kids snack at night and come out and then fix them breakfast in the morning. But to get out there, we had to ride in the Beast, which was one of those big pickup trucks with the wooden sort of gate sides that you have to take out and and put back in kind of thing. And I would ride in the back of the thing as we were 4-wheeling it and off-roading it all the way out to the sleeping platforms. So it's like, okay, here's my one risk adventure, woo, kind of thing. Yeah, I know. Even that's not that big a risk, but anyway, it was just so much fun to go out there and then be part of like whatever ghost stories were being told around the campfire, and providing them the requisite bug juice, the red punch, and I forget what the other snack was, chocolate chip cookies or something like that. And I would sometimes sleep out under the stars out there on the Wednesday nights with the girls so I could help some of the counselors. And you'd be sleeping peacefully, and then you would hear just the most horrendous snarling and almost like blood curdling. And it was the raccoons fighting over the last of the bug juice and the cookies in the it was like an overshed kind of thing where all the tables were, and there were like 3 or 4 of them, and they were just like, you know, drunken frat boys just having a ball, you know, lapping up everything and fighting with each other, and and of course the kids would be like, what's the matter? And so we could either have fun with it and sort of tell them stories, or we could reassure them and tell them, oh, it's just the raccoons. It sort of depended on the nature of the camper asking. If it was somebody who's been a pistol that week, well, they got the scarier story. Well, then on the mornings when I would have to ride out there to make the breakfast, like on the boys' morning, Guppy and I would get up, you know, like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, load up the beast with the pancake batter, blueberry pancake batter, and all the bacon and the orange juice and everything, and put it on the beast, and then 4-wheel it, you know, off-road it all the way out there, and then arrive as quietly as possible. And then we'd pull up. And if the director of the camp wasn't there, then either Guppy or I would take one of the metal pans that we had and one of the metal spoons and go, wake up the kids. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. You know? You look like a monkey and smell like one too. You know, just having a lot of fun with the kids. Wake them up. They'd be all bleary eyed. And of course, the little boys had fooled the little girls into thinking that they needed to bring their curling irons with them. So that when they got out of bed, they could fix their hair. We kept trying to tell them, sweetie, there's no electrical plugs. No. So you'd find out which of them were gullible enough about that time, because they'd start pulling out their curling irons like, no, put it away. There's no place to plug that in. And we'd make them breakfast. And of course, they would hike back to camp and we would, you know, off-road it back up there. But it was just things like that. The camp also had a flume. It used to be a logging camp. And it had a flume, which is one of the, you know, those big, huge slides where you know, put the logs down it and they go shooting off and into the river. And they turned it into a ride that you could get on gunny sacks and going down. And it was Bloom's Flume, because Bloom was one of the, I don't know, the early loggers on that property, a historical person. So, and now they have a ropes course, but I wasn't there at the time they put that in. But those were the few times when I got a chance to kind of live out the things I should have been doing as a kid, you know, riding on the back of pickups over dirt roads and having a lot of fun, you know, teasing people into the stars. I'd been such an A-type personality, honor student kind of person that there were people who kind of had known me from my youth and met me when I got into college, and they're like, you've changed a little. just a little. I have a little more fun now. So anyway, that was always such a blast. Just be able to work with the kids and do a few things that my own inner kid didn't get a chance to do when I should have, and I was their age. So there you go.
It's great to hear these personal stories. Great to hear. Thank you.
John, I'll contribute a personal narrative if you like.
Okay, sure.
I'll try to be succinct. It's a longer story, but I'll try to give you guys the short version. Adrian, I wish I had your enthusiasm. It's fantastic. So this is not as fun and freewheeling as your story, but I'll title this personal narrative, The Day I Learned to Be a Public Speaker. And it happened very, very, very early in my childhood. I was 13 years old and I was living in Claremont. Let me preface my story by saying that all these years later, how do I want to articulate this? I'm okay with all this, that the story that I'm about to unpack. And I actually look back on the journey that I took away from home for 8 months in 1983 as a kind of a seminal moment in my life, obviously, and a turning point. So I look back on it with a sense of pride that I was able to survive it. So it may not sound that way when I illuminate it for all of you, but at any rate, the year was 1983, and I was somewhere around the age of 13 or so, and at the time, my parents had recently divorced, and I was living at my father's house in Claremont, and it was summer break, and I had been spending a few days with my mother, Nancy, who's right behind me on the wall. And Nancy also lived in Claremont. So my father and my mother still stayed in town close to each other. At any rate, I'd spent a couple of days hanging out with my mother. And one morning she just said, let's go run some errands. And I thought that Nancy was going to take me shopping and just run some of her personal errands. And so it was a very hot day. I remember I was wearing sweats and jumped in the front seat, but I just remember it being very warm, and we were headed down into Pomona, and I didn't know where we were going, but it started to look a little suspicious because normally we would try to avoid Pomona. And so we turned into a residential area, and then another couple of turns, and all of a sudden we pulled into a building, a one-level building, but it looked very much like a commercial building, but it had a pool in the front of it with large, really tall glass windows. And I thought this was strange, and my mother was being very coy at the time and wasn't really saying much. And so I remember we drove behind the building, and we went behind it, and we parked behind the building, and just off to that parking lot was an alley. And so I thought this felt very suspicious. My intuition kicked in. And she said, wait here, honey, I'm going to be right back. And so I just knew something was up, something wasn't right. And at the time, I grew very nervous very quickly. And then I was watching as she came out of the building with two very big guys. And as soon as I saw the guys by her side, I jumped from the car and I started running down the back alley as fast as I could. Those guys obviously took off after me and tackled me to the floor, to the ground, and picked me up and physically brought me into a facility that was adjacent. And I just remember the doors shutting, very thick metal doors. And suddenly I had been transformed into what appeared like an episode of The Twilight Zone. My father always loved watching Rod Serling's Twilight Zone. And, you're watching Twilight Zone, and, you're sitting in your house where you're watching TV. You guys know, we're all old enough to remember Twilight Zone. And all of a sudden, Rod Serling, puts this episode together, and you're just in this bizarre world. Like, what the hell? How did we get into this world for 30 minutes? And that's exactly what it felt like. I thought, well, where the hell am I, and what's going on? Well, I was locked up in that facility for the next 8 months. And turns out that side of the facility was an adult psychiatric unit that they had quickly taken me into. 3 days later, I would be taken over to the adolescent unit. While I was in the adult unit, though, it was a very sterile environment. The windows were, 2 to 3 inches of plexiglass, hard plexiglass, metal doors, very cold environment. Fortunately, I didn't have to witness much of anything on the adult unit. So thankfully, I don't have any stories to share of that time, but I was basically in jail and didn't realize where I was at or what I was doing or why. And 3 days later, they came and got me, and they took me over to the teen unit. And there was about 30 kids, anywhere from the age of 13 to 17. And I remember when I first walked in, it was a very small place in Pomona, but they had a very, very tiny schoolroom, classroom, and a lovely lady by the name of Judy, beautiful smile and very friendly, ran the classroom. But I remember I was so shut down emotionally and otherwise. All these years later, I remember I wore this, and I detest people that wear hoodies, teenagers that wear these hoodies. But at the time I was wearing a hoodie, and I'm not a hoodie guy, but I just was completely covered in my hood. And obviously I was hiding out and trying to figure out what was going on. And so I eventually got introduced to all the kids. And for time management here, I won't go into a lot of detail, but I'll just illuminate, probably 3 or 4 people that really stick out, and my journey, my 8-month journey through that experience. But over those months, I remember coming into the facility very closed down emotionally, very quiet, obviously, and very withdrawn and shy. And I was trying to make sense of, what the hell had happened here, and why did this happen? And the teenagers, most of the teenagers that were in that unit were just pissed off kids that were upset with their parents. There wasn't really too much extreme behavior except a couple of people. And we had to endure, unfortunately, a few of the kids that were pretty disturbed. John, the redheaded 15-year-old who would always cry in group therapy about molesting boys, we had to endure that. And for a 13-year-old kid to have to listen to that was a pretty eye-opening experience. I should have been in 7th grade, but instead I'm listening to John talk about that. And Sherry was constantly slitting her wrists and trying to run away from the facility. My roommate, Steve, though, was a very interesting character, much older kid, very, very tall, 17-year-old. He looked like he was 20. And I remember he would always play Stairway to Heaven on his guitar that he was allowed to have in our room. There would be 4 kids to a room in 4 different beds, and with its own bathroom facility. And then probably finally Matthew, the rich kid from Upland, whose ticket to the facility, as I call it, was that every day after school, Matthew would escape reality by taking paint in his socks in the garage. So he too, John, was in the garage, but unfortunately he was up to some pretty nefarious activities, and he would get high on the paint. So those were kind of the extreme kids or behaviors. Mine was a breakdown of communication with my dad and frustration through a divorce, but fortunately I was very sane and lucid. But over the months, you would have these levels that you would have to go through. You'd come in at level R, which was restricted. And it was very bizarre because, one minute you're in 7th grade and the next minute you're trying to figure out this unique twilight zone of a world that you're in and navigate through that. And you'd work your way up to level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 6. And slowly over the months, with a lot of counseling and communicating, obviously the hoodie went away pretty quick and I came out of my shell. And finally, months later, I would eventually grow to the position of group leader. And that would be where all 30 of us would gather every day for our group, the whole facilities group. And a person would have to lead that group on a regular basis. And I had graduated through those levels to be able to actually lead the group and have a voice. And I found my voice and was able to speak and lead those meetings. And eventually, obviously, I got out 8 months later and I came back to my 8th grade junior high, and all the kids had wondered, where the hell I had been for the past year. And I never really said much about my journey of where I had been and the difficulties of it. But I look back on that experience, and it's the first time that my voice took flight And I transcended that shyness and that anger and withdrawal feelings, and learned how to be a speaker and learned how to lead groups. And I walked out of there feeling very tall. I walked in feeling very small, and obviously, but I walked out feeling very tall with a sense of confidence. But that's what got me to eventually become a speaker and eventually work for the city of Chino and become a drug prevention speaker at the age of 20 and go around all the schools and teach drug prevention and tell my stories of my personal journeys and odysseys through the world, and mix those in with my drug prevention. But that was the beginnings of what would become an interest in public speaking. So there's my, I don't know what I even titled this story. I guess how I found my voice. I don't know how I became a public speaker.
It's an origin story.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
What a
Of your
tale.
of your superpower.
Yeah. I have a mouth, let me tell you, Adrian. I have quite the mouth. It started back then.
There's your superpower.
There's my superpower. This guy has quite the mouth, no doubt.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a very dramatic story.
Very dramatic.
I tried
Right.
to tone down the drama. There's a lot more there, but for the sake of not leaving all of you guys wincing with depression, I tried to give you the light version of it. So
We'll have to buy your book to read it later, right?
it's in the book. There's no doubt about it. It's in the book in great detail, excruciating detail.
There you go.
Well, this has turned out to be an interesting evening of personal stories. It's neat the way the evening can kind of morph into whatever people are feeling at the time.
Yeah.
Well, thank God to Walter to tell a story about Mount Baldy, which, I mean, my brother had friends that were killed on Mount Baldy, but I mean, just to hear the personal narratives are always interesting. And when you think you don't have a story, and then while I was listening to yours, John, and Adrian's, and I'm like, I wonder if I could condense this little drama and trauma into something small. But yeah, I like the personal narratives that people tell. They're always very interesting.
Yeah. So, anybody else have a story?
I could do a short one
Okay.
Yay.
based upon all these revelations. One time I went to the grocery store with my mother. I was probably 5. And I would go over and arrange all the paper goods because I just loved stationery and stuff. And that kept me busy. And then when we left this one time, she got me some animal crackers, and I was thrilled. I got animal crackers all my own. Then I felt really bad that my brother didn't get any. So I stole some and I hid them underneath the car seat in front. Mother didn't know I'd done it. And like 2 days later, I mentioned, oh, I got some animal crackers for Bill because you didn't get him any. You did what? I got Bill some animal crackers. How'd you do that? Well, I just took them. What? And then the next thing I knew, it was like a day later, they'd obviously had this big discussion. And so we went to the grocery store, Mother and I, and we stood there at the counter, and she said, okay, explain to them what you did. And so I had to confess what I'd done. And they said, oh, well, you don't ever want to do anything like that again, little girl. They were just they were into the whole drama of it, And sure enough, I don't steal stuff. I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes
That's
getting
it.
caught can be a really good thing.
Yeah.
You were scared straight.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Where are you? The one time that I think don't we all have a story of telling of when we stole something when we were little kids? I mean, I know I have one, and it's so shameful, but I mean, just stealing candy bars out of the John, I don't know if you or Barbara, if you remember, do you guys remember Bentley's Market downtown in the Claremont Village where Rhino Records is?
Only by reputation, because I wasn't here then, but I know all about it because my husband went to school there. So
Oh, okay. What, John, do you remember Bentley's?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a million years ago. But, you know, I'd come every day, I'd steal these damn candy bars, and I was so ashamed. But there was this guy, and I'd walk into the store, and I think I was stealing it because of the way he made me feel, or I don't know, but he had this mad dog look, and he'd always be staring at me, and very suspicious. And I think he used to piss me off or something. So obviously I was figuring out a way to get revenge, but it was ridiculous. I was stealing these candy bars, and every time I'd do it, I'd like, you know, what are you doing? This is so wrong. But I think it was the challenge of, could I outfox and outwit and outsmart this guy? Because as soon as I'd walk in, he'd be on you with his eyes. So you'd have to figure out a way, could you do it and get away with it? But I just remember how ridiculous that was. So I don't know, I do it. Does every kid steal something once and then realize not to do that?
I have to admit, I never stole anything when I was a kid. I was so like scared of being a bad girl that when I go into the store, I would make great pains to be sure that no one would think that I'm stealing anything. If I took something off the shelf, I would make sure that I put it back on the shelf. It's like, I think that's why I needed to ride the beast when I was in working at the kids camp. I had to let out some of that risk energy.
I would suggest an existential rush. Go try to steal a candy bar one day and live on the wild side for a moment.
No, I think I'd get a little too mentally constipated trying to figure out which candy bar to steal.
Don't do it, Adrian.
Don't do it.
Be a good girl.
Okay.
Yeah, I never stole anything, but I did have an episode with my bike again. Several years later, some of the boys in the neighborhood who didn't have a bike said, "Hey, John, could we borrow your bike?" And I said, "Sure." And they did that a couple of times. And then one time when they came back, they had gone to the store. It was a Thrifties, I think, in Ontario. And they were stealing stuff.
No.
Using my bike as the transportation.
Getaway vehicle.
And yeah, the getaway vehicle. And I was worried I'd get blamed for it somehow. If I ever rode my bike there, what if they, I just felt really, really bad. So I confronted them and I said, "You can't use my bike ever again." And it kind of ended friendship with those kids, but I didn't want that happening.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah, probably a good thing the friendship ended.
Otherwise, you'd be on the most wanted TV program by this point.
Yeah.
Hanging out with some nefarious characters over there in Ontario.
Well, I have a very short story about juvenile crime in a very small scale. I used to be an elementary school teacher. I did that for 36 years. And one year, the kids go out to recess at lunch. I have lunch in the staff room with the teachers. And then I come back and unlock my room, and the kids line up and they come in the room, and then we get back to work. Well, one day I came back from lunch, got my key out, and it wouldn't get in the lock. The lock was full of little sticks that had been jammed in the lock, so I couldn't unlock it. So fortunately, my room had two doors, so I went around to the other side and unlocked it from the other side. A few days later, I came back from lunch, and my lock was jammed up again. I went around to the other side, and that lock was also jammed up. So we couldn't get back in the classroom, and there really wasn't much to do except have the kids wait around until I got the custodian to get a pair of tweezers and pull those little sticks out so I could get my key in the lock and let us in, which took quite a long time. In the meantime, the kids didn't have to do any work. So I pretty much figured it was somebody in my room that was doing it.
Mhm.
And then this happened maybe 2 or 3 more times. Unpredictable. Days would go by and then suddenly it would happen again. So I got the idea that I would have my own sting operation. I went to the office as usual, but I brought my lunch right back and I ate my lunch in my room. And I figured I was probably dealing with a pretty wily character. So I had this, what we called the science cabinet in my room. And in there was a periscope. And so I ate my lunch, I had the lights off. And sure enough, there was a knock at my door. I didn't do anything. I stayed quiet, but I was getting ready to duck under my desk because sure enough, the kid, I saw him, he went to the window and was peeking inside to see if I was in there. But I would duck under my desk and watch him with my periscope. He knocked on the window and he stared all around to make sure the coast was clear. Then I heard the lock being jiggled as he was putting sticks in the lock. So I quietly walked up to the door and kind of flung it open. And there he was with sticks in one hand and an unbent paper clip that he had been using to jam the sticks into the lock. He gave just a moment of surprise. He looked at me and then he very calmly said, "Oh, Mr. Roth, I'm so glad that you're here. You know, I'm trying very hard to get these sticks out of your lock. I'm pulling them out with my paper clip because I didn't want you to have to, wait again like you've been doing to get the custodian." I thought, this kid is an absolutely excellent liar. How could he think of that and be so calm? And he was only 10 years old. How can he do that? So I had a certain amount of disgust with the kid, but also I had to admire the fact that he was such an accomplished liar.
Scary thought, Walter, is whatever became of him as an adult.
Yeah.
He ran for office, of course.
Man, that's a good one.
Wow. That sort of ranks up in the annals of, gee, if we pull the fire alarm, we won't have to have final exams.
Right.
There was a thing on the internet the other day. I don't know if it was TikTok or something anyway, but there was notes that kids write to their parents and or put up places, and one of them was a note with an arrow pointing to the light switch, and it says, "Do not turn this off ever." And it was under the guise of, if the lights don't go out, we don't have to go to bed.
There you go.
Oh man. Do you have any idea what that kid's doing now?
Creating mayhem somewhere.
Yeah. Wow.
So Glenn brought up a question, and that is, when will we be ready to go back to in-person meetings for the Story Swap? The Claremont Forum is now open
Yay.
for use. So I'd like to do kind of an informal poll here to see who is comfortable with doing in-person meetings and who is not. I have mixed feelings about it. Anybody want to chime in?
Well, John, you know how I feel. I'm totally for having in-person meetings. I've been fully vaccinated and quite comfortable. So
yeah, I
but
feel like
it.
yeah, I totally agree. I feel like if if folks are vaccinated, then would be great to meet together. But if folks are not vaccinated, then would we say you can't come, or you just have to wear a mask? Or because I'm I'm part of the Rain Cross Chorale, and they're trying to decide whether or not we're going to start rehearsals again at the end of the summer for an October concert. And there's, I mean, I don't know how many people are, 60 some odd people in the chorale. And, I don't think, well, speaking might be just as much a spreader thing as singing, although in storytelling, it's one speaker at a time. But, we do laugh and we talk and we exchange ideas and we're in a closed space. And so there's been, articles in the news about how one of the early super spreader events was the Skagit Community Choir up in Washington State.
Mhm.
And they had a 2-hour rehearsal. And of the 62 people at the rehearsal, 51 of them were diagnosed with COVID within the next 2 weeks. A bunch of them were hospitalized and 2 people passed away. So, I put my 2 cents in with the chorale board and I said, if we're vaccinated, then that's not an issue, but there are a bunch of people in the choir who don't want to be vaccinated, and their very activity is scientifically proven to spread virus. So yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. I feel fine because I'm vaccinated, but I just also know that doesn't mean I won't catch it or that someone else won't catch it.
So the vaccination is key for you.
For me, it's at least it's a safety net, that we're, if the room is full of vaccinated people, we're not likely to make one another sick or take viruses home with us.
I think we could probably be almost 6 feet apart. Even the kids in school now only have to be 3 feet apart. And those who are listening can wear a mask, and the person speaking is way 6 feet away from the group. So I think we ought to do it. And if people don't want to do it because they're not vaccinated, they should go get vaccinated if they can, if it's physically possible for.
So Barbara, are you thinking we should all just be wearing masks unless you're the one telling the story?
Yeah, that would make most people feel safe.
Yeah.
And it's probably smart.
That would make me feel better. Yeah. Chorale rehearsal, it's really hard to sing with a mask on. So there's
Yeah.
Although there is a singer's mask that's pretty freaking awesome. But anyway, okay, yeah, I can see how that would make a difference though.
But I don't think the person telling the story should wear a mask.
No, I don't
That's
either.
what she was saying, yeah.
Although I was in school this week doing string games with the kids, and the teacher and all the kids had on masks as they spoke. So it is possible to do it.
Yeah.
What about you, Walter? What do you think?
Well, I do have mixed feelings about it. And also, I feel almost like I'm still just a guest with this group. I'm not sure how much weight my voice should have. But living in Riverside, it's the drive also that is a concern to me.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
And if we do go back to in-person meetings, I have had several people request that we Zoom them also. And if I can get permission from the Claremont Forum to have their password to their Wi-Fi, I could bring a laptop and set it on a chair in the middle of the room facing whoever's telling the story. And people could be at home watching. It would be harder to share the story, but even that would be possible as long as we turn the volume up. I don't think we'd all crowd around the screen to see it, but we could at least listen to the story. It might be worth trying.
Well, I will say this, I come back to Claremont once a month, and I would build my trips, or not that the group should care about this, but I'm just, sharing it. I would build my trips around the story group meeting in person. And I would also make sure I was telling a story so that I felt like I was really contributing, not only for the benefit of the group, but also my own personal development. I'm not going to drive from Arizona and then not tell a story. So that doesn't make a lot of participatory sense. But yeah, I just, and I come back, John, for mental health. I mean, that's what I view my trips as. It's very isolating out here in Prescott. And I come back to socialize with some friends and some of my investors and just humanity. And and I feel comfortable doing that because I am vaccinated. I still wear a mask quite a bit in the areas where I have to. So I'm not just, you know, out there jumping in front of a bunch of people, you know, willy-nilly. But everybody I know seems to be vaccinated, except a few people that are just going to be, you know, holdouts. But I think, you know, wearing the mask, if you're listening, as Barbara suggested, and then the person telling the story, you know, being able to have that freedom to not wear it, I think that makes good sense. But my two thoughts.
Okay, I think when I send out the summary of the meetings, I will put it out for other people to have input on it and see what we find out.
Mhm.
It'd be nice. The other thing too, I don't know, that maybe just a suggestion, but it'd be nice to maybe take inventory of all those people too, John, to say, you know, okay, well, I mean, hypothetically, you know, this is the month we start doing meetings, you know, we'll start it if we can get, you know, 6 people to commit to show up, you know, so you're not having a meeting where you've got, you know, 3 people showing up and 9 people on Zoom, you know, and it's like, kind of defeats the purpose of going through the whole thing. But I just, you know, live human connection. I mean, my story was about human connection, and that story never stops throughout our lives. You know, I know we need to be safe and we need to be healthy. Obviously, that's of paramount importance. But the human connection, face to face, especially for a story group, I think is it's what I always loved. You know, when we had our monthly meetings, you know, when I would go, just to look forward to seeing everybody in full flight, you know, doing their thing. And that's just, you know, I've told you so many times, I'd come back from a meeting just buzzing with, you know, someone's interesting story that was so compelling. And, you know, seeing somebody be fully human, it's really cool.
Yeah, I as a storyteller, I find it awkward telling my story to a computer screen. It's much more satisfying to have a live audience.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, there's a different kind of energy there that's really nice.
A lot.
Well, but even, you know, even for me, like when I go out on stage in front of hundreds of people, I get amped up. But when I tell a story in front of 12 people, I get a little, you know, it's rocky. So, you know, that my point of that is that, you know, that human connection when you're telling your story in front of 7 or 8 or 12 people, whatever, it's still pretty intense. Even though it's a small group, you would think it'd be, you know, child's play or a walk in the park, but it's actually more intense for me, you know, to have the nerve and the courage to get up there and tell something.
When I've done vocal performance, singing and such, I found that smaller audiences make me nervous, and
Yeah.
larger audiences, I can sing in front of a couple thousand people and I'm fine, but give me, you know,
Yeah.
10 people that I'm singing in front of, and it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean,
And they're all
storytelling's
staring
not-
at you.
Yeah,
They're all
exactly.
staring at you.
Storytelling for me is not
Yeah.
quite the same level of intensity in that regard, but I understand the feeling in a different area of performance. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure, it's similar to
John,
everybody.
how does Chris feel about it? She's on, but she's muted.
I don't know. I'm in a different room. I'm upstairs, she's downstairs.
Hey, Chris.
Chris, what do you think?
Take your hands out of your gloves and washing the dishes. And let us
No,
know.
Chris.
I suspect maybe she is doing something else.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she may have taken the dogs outside,
Oh,
for instance,
okay.
which is why I'm upstairs in a closed room, is because
Hey, she's unmuted. Hey, Chris.
Oh. Uh-oh.
We thought you were in timeout.
I have been. I've enjoyed the stories. Thank you very much. And I don't know exactly what the question is.
the question is, when are we going to start having
Mm-hmm.
in-person story swaps at the Claremont Forum? And do you feel comfortable with doing that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I John and I just made a trip to Sedona last week, and it was my first time to venture out for a year and a half.
Whoa.
And so it was a really strange feeling. I saw more people than I'd seen in all that time. So I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't be more help, and I didn't get to hear what everybody else said because I was out taking in clothes. So
There were some mixed reactions and discussions of, vaccination, making some of us feel better, or having everyone masked unless they're the storyteller. So there's been a variety of bits of conversation about it, just kind of tossing out ideas and what minimum number of people we need to make it feel, I don't know if I want to say worthwhile. That feels a little pejorative, but how many people in person would make it feel like, yeah, this is the right thing to do before we decide maybe we should stay on Zoom longer. I don't know.
I think we might get more people.
Yeah.
That would be my hope.
in person.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In person.
Usually July meeting is very, very small.
Uh-huh.
No, I don't know
I'd
how
forget.
it'll be this year, but John and I and one other person one time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because
So-
it's early enough in the month that people are kind of off on their 4th of July holidays. But August is usually decently attended, right?
Because school starts.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe
Why don't we
August,
shoot for August? Yeah.
yeah.
Well, John, will you be here in August?
That's a good question. I'll have to look at the calendar I don't have one in front of me. What is the second Tuesday of August?
Let me see.
It is the 10th.
Yeah. I may be back. See, I'm gonna be in the Sierras. I leave on August 1st for a mule pack trip, but I think I'll be back by the 10th.
Yes, that's what the calendar says, John.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
I can
you're-
check with the forum and see if they're okay with us having the meetings again, which I think they will be, but
Mhm.
and also ask about the Wi-Fi.
Yeah. And if not August, then definitely September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Assuming
know.
the numbers stay low.
Then you mean the COVID numbers?
Yeah, the COVID numbers.
Yeah.
So far, it's
yeah.
looking pretty good.
It is.
Yeah, but everything's about to open up again. So we'll see.
It's
But
been
maybe
a long
between-
haul.
But maybe between everything opening up, another month goes by, June 15th to July 15th, then you can look at the landscape of how California is doing. That hopefully gives enough time for, maybe it becomes September that resonates with people
Mhm.
more. It gives you more time to get more vaccinations, gives you some time to digest how the June 15th opening affected California over the following 6
Mhm.
weeks,
Right.
4 weeks.
Yeah.
I know, for instance, I'm going to a restaurant Friday night in Orange County. I'll be in Fullerton. My friend Cynthia has owned that restaurant for 30 years, her and her husband. So I mean, people are obviously starting to come back out. There's still safety protocols and so forth. But anyways, I'm just thinking that maybe August, September, but seems like definitely September would make a lot of sense and give time, for people to get
Yeah.
used to it, and maybe also chime in with their thoughts and,
Yeah.
raising their hand to say, hey, I will be there, or I would like to be there. And then I think maybe starting out with the mask idea is also a good idea to maybe ease into it slower,
Well, and this is a a good running start to let people know over the course of the summer that we're really preferring that folks are vaccinated if they want to come in person. And that gives them 2 or 3 months, you know, because we've just dangled a carrot in front of them. So, come back to the story swap meetings. Come on, go get your vaccination.
Well,
So,
it's interesting. 'Cause I know people in my social circle that just had refused to get the vaccine, and I'm okay being around them because they don't go nowhere for the most part. But I think if I know if I'm gonna walk into a story group room, even though I'm vaccinated, it would be nice to know that, you know, those 8 people or those 12 people are vaccinated just for their own safety, and not that I have an agenda,
yeah,
you know, that says morally you should be vaccinated. That's not my point. It's just I like being next to vaccinated people because then I feel like everyone's safer.
yeah,
You know, but you know, I think the unvaccinated folks amongst us, which I think everyone knows them, so there's no judgment there. But
right.
I think what I've seen is those people kind of still are staying at home, working from home, have jobs from home. You know, they're kind of segregated more, and maybe that will evolve. It will over time. That will have to evolve. You know, they can't stay that way for the next 20 years. So
The science says something about a safe ratio would be 1 in 10 people not vaccinated. So like
oh,
90% of the room has to be vaccinated um, for there to be safety in having unvaccinated folks there. That's a steep curve, but you know, anyway, thought I'd put that out there.
oh, that's interesting. I'd actually never heard that, so that's fascinating.
I would,
I
there was
also
an
think
article.
maybe that's what it's going to be. I actually think when it's all said and done, you know, you're still going to have those 1 in 10 that are not.
I think it's going to be a higher percentage who are not vaccinated because we've just, yeah, anyway. Yeah, the article that I was reading about the different scientific studies into choral and voice projection and the ways in which you expel droplets when you sing. And in that same article, it brought up the issue of, you know, the safest ratio is 1 vaccinated person for every 9, one unvaccinated person for every 9 vaccinated to avoid spread of the virus. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, okay, I think we've had a good discussion about this. Anything else people want to bring up? I think I will mention I'm performing on Saturday afternoon at the San Francisco Free Folk Festival. I included that
Right.
link in the last email if you want to listen to me tell a story and listen to others. Marilyn McPhee will be telling a story, and Yvette Brandy. I don't know if you've ever heard her. She's a really good storyteller.
How late? What times?
It starts at 3, goes from 3 to 4:15, I think, something like
Thank
that.
you.
It's the link to register. You have to register to get the Zoom link. It's free.
Okay.
Is in the last email I sent out, and I may send a reminder.
Cool. And next Wednesday, the 16th, is the Storytelling Association of California concert where we're doing the folk tales and fairy fables, whatever. And I'll be doing my Celtic version of Cinderella.
Yay!
Yeah, I know. He told Ed tells me I have 10 minutes, so I may need to do a little more judicious editing. I've gotten it down to like 12. I'll see if I can whittle out just a wee bit more.
Yeah, I have a very strict 10-minute limit on my story. I will have to do some practicing to make sure that I fall under the 10-minute mark.
Yeah.
I know this is random and off topic, so I apologize. But did anybody see what's her name? The woman I love so much out there in the desert, John.
Karen.
Oh.
Karen, my good buddy Karen.
Karen Ray.
I can't remember. Yeah, did anybody go on YouTube and see her story of her doing a home story, and when she grabs her throat and she does the frog?
No, I didn't
Nope.
see that one.
Oh.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You got to see that. It's on YouTube. I mean, I fell out of the chair and I would tell friends to come in and see it. I mean, it was, I mean, she's good. We all know how good she is, but
she's
that's
Amazing.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
hysterical. You
Yeah,
gotta look it up on YouTube.
she's a
And
great storyteller.
And she can do the absolute goofiest things with absolute deadpan sincerity. And it's like, I love it.
Oh,
Yeah.
but you gotta see this one, because if you want to talk about what you just said, times 10, you gotta see this. I mean, I don't usually go get YouTube clips and start sharing them with people, but I would be sending her YouTube clip to people I know. That's how, and I've seen her tell a lot of stories, Adrian, over 10 years. John's seen more.
What should we look up to find that story on YouTube?
Just find her name.
Yeah.
I think she only has a few, she only has a few videos on YouTube, but if you find her name, but just remember, it's the one she's grabbing her throat and she's talking about the frog. It's so flipping hysterical, you'll be on the ground.
Okay, I'll have to watch
It's a
that.
great storytelling.
Oh gosh, that's great.
It's why you become a storyteller.
Thanks, guys. It's been wonderful.
Yep, I think we probably can call an end to